Miss International is a Japan-based international beauty pageant, but did you know that the first 7 editions of Miss International were actually held in Long Beach, California? I think this may be due to the fact that the Miss Universe pageant was actually established in Long Beach, California in the United States, only 8 years prior to Miss International. And actually, the year in which Miss International started, the year before that, Miss Universe moved to Miami. So it was the perfect time for a new pageant to sweep into Long Beach, California and take over. In this video, we are going to be going through each and every single Miss International title holder, of course starting in 1960 when the pageant began. In 1960, Miss International, the very first one, happened on the 12th of August 1960, as I've stated before, in Long Beach, United States. There were 52 entrants and the winner was actually Stella Marquez, who was 23 years old. As for the number of entrants, it started in the low 50s and then unfortunately went down to the 40s, which it remained in for a very long time. For a long time, Miss International didn't see any increase or substantial increase in contestants. The second edition of Miss International 1961, happened on the 28th of July 1961. And Stanny van Beer, who was 19 years old and representing the Netherlands, was crowned Miss International of that year. The next year, Australia's Tanya Verstaak took the crown. She was 20 years old. And in 1963, Iceland's Gjörens Björnadóttir, who was 20 years old, took the crown. In 1964, the gorgeous Jenna Cruz from the Philippines, who was 21, took the Miss International crown for the Philippines. And in 1965, Germany's Ingrid Finger, who was 20 years old, took the crown. Now, remember how I've mentioned that the very first couple of editions of Miss International was held in Long Beach? Well, in 1966, unfortunately, there was no Miss International competition as Long Beach had problems hosting the pageants. I'm not exactly sure what had happened, but I think that maybe there was talk that Miss Universe was coming back to Long Beach, and so they didn't necessarily want any competition. But Miss Universe actually ended up staying in Miami and moving on to other locations. But for this reason and for this confusion, there was no Miss International in 1966, but in 1967, Long Beach hosted the Miss International pageant for the very last time in this, long stint of hosting Miss International before the pageant started moving on largely to Japan for the next 3 years. So in 1967, Mirta Massa of Argentina took the Miss International crown and she was 22 years old. In 1968, the Miss International pageant moved to Japan for the very first time, and this is where 18-year-old Maria Carvalho of Brazil took the crown. In 1969, the United Kingdom's Valerie Holmes took the crown. She was 23 years old. And in 1970, the Philippines' Aurora Piguan, who is so gorgeous, took the crown, and she was 20 years old. In 1971, the Miss International pageant returned to Long Beach, California for one last time before moving on, like I said, largely to Japan for at least the next 10 years. So in that year, of course, New Zealand's Jane Hansen, who was 20 years old, took the Miss International crown. In 1972, Linda Hooks from the United Kingdom, who was 20 years old, took the crown, and this happened in Tokyo, Japan. In 1973, Annelie Björkling, who was 21 years old, took the crown for Finland. In 1974, it was Brucine Smith from the United States, who was 23, who took the crown. And in 1975, Yugoslavia's Lindia Manic, who was 22, took the crown. For the next 5 years, the pageant happened exclusively in Tokyo, Japan, and in 1976, 19-year-old Sophie Perrin from France took the crown. In 1977, it was 21-year-old Pilar Medina from Spain. In 1978, it was 20-year-old Catherine Ruth from the United States. In 1979, it was 15-year-old Melanie Marquez from the Philippines who took the crown. And that's just insane to me. 15. Not only is Melanie Marquez the youngest Miss International ever, but I do believe that she is the youngest winner of any major international pageant ever, which is insane. In 1980, still in Tokyo, Japan, 21-year-old Lorna Chavez from Costa Rica took the crown. And in 1981, the pageant moved on to a different city in Japan called Kobe, and 21-year-old Jenny Derrick from Australia took the crown. In 1982, it was 19-year-old Christy Claridge from the United States. And in 1983, it was 17-year-old Gidget Sandoval from Costa Rica. In 1984, 22-year-old Ilma Urrutia from Guatemala took the crown. In 1985, it was 22-year-old Nina Cecilia from Venezuela. In 1986, it was 22-year-old Helen Fairbrother from England. In 1987, it was 18-year-old Laurie Simpson from Puerto Rico. In 1988, it was 22-year-old Catherine Gude from Norway. And in 1989, it was 20-year-old Iris Klein from Germany. In 1990, we saw 19-year-old Silvia de Esteban from Spain crowned as Miss International. And in 1991, it was 19-year-old Agnieszka Kotlarska from Poland. I recently did a video all about Agnieszka. Unfortunately, she has passed away since then, and I just felt compelled to do a whole video about it, so feel free to check that out. In 1992, we had 20-year-old Kirsten Davidson from Australia. In 1993, it was 20-year-old Agnieszka Pachalko from Poland. In 1994, it was 22-year-old Kristina Leka from Greece. And in 1995, it was 21-year-old Anne-Lena Hansen from Norway. 1996 saw Portugal's Fernanda Alves crowned at the age of 20. And 1997 saw Venezuela's Consuelo Adler, who was 20, crowned Miss International 1997. For the next 6 years, yet again, the pageant was held in Tokyo, Japan. The contestant amount, it stayed around 40 to 56. It really hasn't gone up that much since the pageant started. Granted, it had started at around 40 years ago at this point, so it was really not great for the pageant to not see a vast amount of growth like Miss Universe and Miss World had seen. But nevertheless, in 1998, Leah Borrero, who was 22 years old from Panama, was crowned Miss International. In 1999, it was 19-year-old Paula Galvez from Colombia. In the year 2000, it was 21-year-old Vivian Urdaneta from Venezuela. In 2001, it was 23-year-old Małgorzata Roźniaka from Poland. And in 2002, it was Christina Savaya, who was 22 years old from Lebanon. In 2003, we saw Venezuela's Gozider Azua, who was 19 years old, crowned as Miss International. And in 2004, for the very first time in a very long time, the pageant was held outside of Japan in Beijing, China. This edition saw 58 contestants, which I think is a high record for the pageant at that point, and since this point onward we slowly but surely see the number of contestants go up into the 60s and then the 70s. So in 2004 we saw Jamie Vargas, who was 21 years old, crowned Miss International. She was of course from Colombia. In 2005 we saw 22-year-old Lara Kikaman from the Philippines crowned Miss International. In 2006 it was 21-year-old Daniela Di Giacomo from Venezuela. In 2007 it was 24-year-old Priscilla Perales from Mexico, and she actually is a big marker in Miss International history because this is actually the first time that Miss International had over 60 contestants. They had 61 contestants in 2007. In 2008, 18-year-old Alejandra Andrew from Spain was crowned as Miss International. In 2009, it was Mexico again, so they had a bit of a sandwich victory in 21-year-old Ana Gabriela Espinoza. In 2010, it was gorgeous 19-year-old Elizabeth Mosquera from Venezuela. In 2011, it was 22-year-old Fernanda Cornejo from Ecuador. In 2012, it was 25-year-old Ikumi Yoshimatsu from Japan. And that is so incredibly, shocking for me actually. It's surprising that they took 52 years to crown Japan because the pageant is held in Japan. Its home country is Japan, and usually at a lot of international pageants, off the top of my head I can think of Miss Universe and Miss Earth, the host country is usually the country that does the best, you know what I mean. At Miss Universe, of course, the USA is the most successful and the most placed country. At Miss Earth, it's the Philippines, and so I was expecting for Japan to have done much better at Miss International, but no, they actually won their one and only crown in the year 2012. So that's quite surprising and quite relieving, to be honest with you. In 2013, of course, we all know it was a big year for the Philippines. Bia Santiago, who was 23 years old, won the Miss International pageant. They also won a Miss World crown that year. In 2014, the beautiful Valerie Hernandez, who was 21 years old, was crowned Miss International. She was from Puerto Rico. In 2015, 20-year-old Edimar Martinez was crowned. She was from Venezuela. In 2016, Kylie Versosa from the Philippines, who was 24 years old, was crowned Miss International 2016. And in 2017, it was 21-year-old Kevin Liliana from Indonesia. In 2018, it was 20-year-old Mariam Velasco from Venezuela. And of course, we know most recently in 2019, 25-year-old Sireethorn Leearamwat from Thailand was crowned Miss International and remains Miss International to this day. In 2019, there was a record-breaking number of contestants, 83 contestants. In this year, of course, after taking a 2-year hiatus, having no pageant in 2020 and 2021, the number of contestants have fallen. But I would definitely say that in the past 10 years, Miss International have definitely risen in terms of, fame, in terms of how people see it. So that's really, really good. Let me know your thoughts on these title holders. Who is your favorite? I would love to know. As ever, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.